Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels with me, Martin Fish, Jill and Sean.
Hi.
Hello.
And this week we've been off to the Chelsea Flower Show where I've been catching up with some of our podcasters from previous episodes. We've got Jonathan Shepherd, who we spoke to about his cosmos, Barry from Proctors Nursery and his wonderful herbaceous perennials, and Dawn from Lincolnshire Pond Plants. So we're going to find out what award they got at Chelsea.
And I was lucky enough to go to Chelsea on press day with you because you were judging, weren't you? Which we'll hear about later on in the podcast. But there were loads of celebs there as well, and you managed to catch up with a few of them to see what they thought of the flower show.
All of that coming up in the podcast. And also we've got a couple of listeners' questions and some jobs that you can be doing in your garden this week. But let's catch up first off with Jonathan, see how he's getting on at Chelsea.
So here we are, Jonathan. You finally have made it to the Chelsea Flower Show with your cosmos, all grown in Brant Bruton. So tell us about this stand here.
Well, first of all, it's just pleasing to have made it. All the cosmos arrived in one piece. It's a 4 metre long stand by, I guess, about 1.8 metres wide, 2 tiers. And crikey, I haven't even counted the number of pots that I've put on, but there's a whole variety of cosmos, from tall ones such as the white cosmos Purity to really small ones like Candy Floss Pink Sunrise, which is a little one. I've got a display of rusty metal cosmos that I made as a nod to the fact that we flooded with a few educational boards that talk about that.
And that sculpture there, the beautiful cosmos, that's been made by a Lincolnshire sculptor?
Yeah, it has. It's a guy called Ian Gill that's less than an hour away. I thought it was important to do something with somebody local. I've never seen anybody that can manipulate a raw piece of metal and turn it into a proper piece of artwork, a true craftsman. So it really goes really well with I've got rusted little holders for my plant labels, so it all hopefully links in. So I'm hoping the judges like what they saw.
Yeah, I'm sure. And you've been judged, haven't you?
Yeah, that happened this morning. So I was in the Great Pavilion, and you get ushered away from your stand quite rightly, and there was it's not the right word, but a gaggle of judges were around there talking and pointing, and it seemed sort of chatting about the stand. So I say they were there for about 25 minutes, so I don't know whether that's a good or bad sign, but some of them turned around and smiled, so hopefully that's a good sign.
That's a good sign. And when I popped out to your nursery, which will be a couple of weeks ago now, the weather had been changeable, very cold nights. We were getting some hot days and even hotter days on the build up to being here at Chelsea. So, I think the plants have fared really well.
Yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare. I think you always go through that bit of a wobble. The polytunnel was getting up to 50 degrees towards the end when the sun sort of came out. So I was shifting pots into the house to keep them in the shade. And then actually on the day of packing, it seemed to never stop raining. So I was convinced that either all the blooms would fall off or they'd get some kind of fungus by the time we arrived. But that doesn't seem to have been the case unless the judges have spotted something. So all in all, we're just really pleased, as I say, to get the cosmos here in one piece.
Yeah, and you're going to be here until Saturday because the show runs right the way through until Saturday afternoon. Do you think they'll stand it, or have you got some replacements in case you need to swap a few?
I brought far too many because the stand was actually slightly smaller than what was advertised. So I've got about 20 terracotta pots behind, so some could be swapped out. But the joy of cosmos is that you can deadhead them, and there's more buds coming along the way. Yeah. So they'll need a bit of water. It's not the ideal conditions. It's quite muggy in here, but I'm pretty sure that there'll be a great display within a week.
I'm sure there will be. And what we've got to remember is yours is what's known as a Linda display, which is an educational. Although you've got the beautiful flowers on here grown in these lovely terracotta pots, it's actually to educate people on what this is as a genus, the fact you've got the national collection, isn't it?
Yeah, so part of it, I wanted to show all the different types of cultivars, small, tall ones that I call almost frothy, that are spreading all over the place, but then also some educational boards which are focused on everything from photoperiodism, which is about plants that don't like to flower unless there's short hours of daylight, to conserving water, to the type of plant feed that you could use for cosmos, to growing in peat-free compost, which is an important issue these days.
Yeah, well, I think it looks great. Like you say, it's been judged. You're waiting for the results to come in. So all the very best, and we'll let everybody know how you've done. Well done, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now you can take a big sigh.
Well, we're pleased to announce that Jonathan was awarded a silver, which is fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, that's brilliant, isn't it? Well done, Jonathan. And the cosmos really did look fantastic. Now, let's get straight on because we want to find out how Barry from Proctors Nurseries got on.
So, Barry, Here we are, the Chelsea Flower Show. Eve of judging, your stand is complete. We talked about this when we spoke to you on a podcast a few weeks ago. Just describe what you've done.
What we've done, we've got a lot of perennials, lupins, delphiniums, all sorts of things in flower all at the same time for the Chelsea Flower Show, which I'm really pleased with.
It looks amazing, doesn't it? And how long has it taken you to put together?
4 or 5 days. We've been here since Wednesday morning and it's now Sunday evening, so that's 5 days, isn't it?
Yeah.
A long-winded process, a lot of moving and tweaking and plants going over because of the heat, and we've had to have the reserves out and sort of things like that. So yeah, a real test for everybody.
Yeah, and where we standing, there's a bit of a draft coming in this door as well. So is that causing you a problem, or is that keeping it cool?
It's sort of both. We want some things keeping cool, but it's also blowing some things backwards, which I don't want to do. It's sort of blowing a lupin sideways and some of the Peter, because they've been in the marquee for 5 days and they are just beginning to sort of stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
But
well, I think it looks absolutely magnificent. You've got the little hut there that you've redone again. It's all about a little potting shed and types of bees and pollination and some amazing flowers on there. So judging is 7 o'clock in the morning.
it is, yes. So
Okay.
I'll be here at 6 o'clock making sure everything's okay, and fingers crossed the judges will be nice to me.
I'm sure they will, and we will feed back to the listeners on the podcast and let them know what medal you get.
That
Well
sounds
done.
good to
And
me.
you've got Trace here as well. Trace, have you done much of this?
No, I've done nothing. I'm sorry. I'm
Yes,
just,
you're the
moral
administration
support.
side.
Yeah, I'm just moral support.
Yeah.
Sorry,
All the paperwork and emails.
You must be
Yes.
very proud of him.
Yes.
Yeah, good. It looks wonderful. Oh, we're getting a bit romantic now. Leave you to it. Good luck tomorrow.
Cheers, Martin.
And Barry got a gold medal, which was
Amazing.
absolutely fantastic.
Oh, that's brilliant news. Well,
Yeah.
there's a bonus exhibitor that Martin was able to catch up with. Now, a few podcast episodes ago, we met Dawn from Lincolnshire Pond Plants, and they also have been exhibiting at Chelsea.
Dawn, here we are, Chelsea 2024. Lincolnshire Pond Plants is who you are. You create ponds at lots of flower shows, and I think this is probably the biggest show pond that I've seen you create. So just tell us briefly about what you've done here.
So we've created a pond that is 9 metres by 12 metres, but it is 2 distinct ponds with a bridge across the middle that people can actually physically walk across. So it was trying to make it so that you could show a full range of different plants within a pond rather than just make it look more wildlife.
And it is amazing, and I've been following this on social media. The articulated lorry left Lincolnshire, I said Yorkshire then for a moment. The articulated lorry left Lincolnshire with all the plants and all the sleepers and everything on it. And then I've seen the videos of you creating this, and it is amazing. You must be very proud.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest, and I think it's one of the best ones that we've done so far. I think the amount of sleepers, the amount of work it took to actually get it built in the first place, and we built it initially in a very small room in one of the RAF buildings, and we couldn't quite fit it all in. So thankfully, it's all come together right.
Yeah, because it is big, and it is, like we're on the bridge at the moment. We've got water to the left, we've got water to the right. Some very mature pond plants, all grown in Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
Beautiful sculpture as well you've got there.
So yes, we found the sculpture when we went round Malvern, and usually I've not found a sculpture that I quite think can fit into a pond, but this is a beautiful lily with a dragonfly on it, which kind of ties in with what we like to do.
Yeah, it's good. Now, you've been judged, but again, you don't know the result, so fingers crossed it's going to be what you're expecting. Hopefully it is. And then, of course, Saturday you've got to get rid of it all. How do you get rid of all that? Because there must be thousands of litres of water in this.
So there's about 10,500 litres of water, and apparently they're going to pump it into a small little drain area just inside the floral marquee.
Okay.
I'm not entirely convinced.
Could take a
people
while.
are not going to get flooded.
Could take a while. And then after this, where are you next? What show are you at next?
So we're at BBC Gardeners World Live, and then we go on to Lincolnshire Show.
The Lincolnshire Show, and you're going to create a pond there on a smaller scale.
We are, yeah, a 3 metre by 3 metre pond, but yes, we are going to be at Lincolnshire Show.
Right, well, we look forward to seeing you there and catching up. Thank you, and all the best with the award.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Martin.
And more excellent news, another gold for Lincolnshire Pond Plants. So congratulations to them.
Fantastic.
They were all really, really good exhibits. They really were. They all deserved it. They're all very, very different as well. So it's great that we were able to catch up and see how they'd done.
Now, I've got a question about these awards. I mean, obviously, it seems to me it's obvious that gold is the top award. But how do the awards work? What's the structure?
Yes, good question, Sean. It starts with a bronze, then it goes on to a silver gilt, and then the gold. Some people get the silver gilt and the silver the wrong way round. So the silver gilt is between a silver and a gold. But of course, they're all good awards, prestigious RHS awards. So they've all done very well.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just to get any award at Chelsea, which is like pretty much the pinnacle of horticulture, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, well, it is, yeah. And, because they're all judged very thoroughly. I in sort of clarity here, didn't judge any of these, but they were all judged. The judging panels consist of 5 people, so there's a chairperson and then 4 judges. Everybody has the judging right on there, and we look at the various points on it. We look at the plants, we look at the design and the overall impression, and then the endeavour, which is the amount of work that's gone into it. And it's all on a criteria, so we can't suddenly say we like it or don't like it. That doesn't work. We follow the criteria. And the one Jonathan did is what we call a Lindley Award, which is an educational one, and that has an extra category in there for the information and interpretation. So they're judged on 4 items. So all very thorough, and then it's checked with moderators to go through that sort of scrutineering. So it's checked and double checked before they get their award.
And the exhibitors are fastidious. I mean, Barry mentioned that he was up at 6 o'clock in the morning before the judges came in at 7. And a lot of the exhibitors were doing that. They were in there very late Sunday night and just doing those final tweaks on the morning, weren't they, of the judging?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I got in there with the judging panel just before 7 on the Monday, because we must let listeners know that the Chelsea Flower Show, by the time you're listening to this, is now finished. But I'm sure you better find coverage on the TV or some platform. But yes, we were in there on the Monday morning at just before 7, and it's a hive of activity, all that last little finishing off before we start the judging.
Barry made me smile because I was chatting to him before he knew his award on the Monday, and he said, I said, there's a peony just round the corner, he said, and it's not open yet, and I don't know what to do, and I'm sure the judges will have noticed it, and it might knock me down a point, and so he was really stressing about it, and he said he got in early that morning, taking off one of the brown petals because he'd had a sleepless night, thinking I must remember to take off that little brown petal. So,
oh my goodness!
It's
it's very clearly a very stressful thing. Shortly, we're going to meet a few celebrities who've been at the Chelsea Flower Show, and after that, we'll hopefully get some jobs to do in the garden. But I want to ask, what sorts of gardens or what sorts of exhibits that you were judging? I'm not saying you named them, but what sort of thing is it, Martin?
All of the exhibits we've just heard from, they're all inside a big marquee called the Great Pavilion. So it's this huge structure with 70-odd nurseries, mainly nurseries in there doing these exhibits. And they can be all sorts. We've got Lincolnshire Pond Plants in there. We've got Barry with his herbaceous and Jonathan with his educational stand. But the panel that I have, because it's all divided into 5 different panels, the panel that I had were what we call the tender panel. Which I chair the RHS Tender Ornamental Plant Committee. So we look after any plants that are tender, house plants, flowering house plants, foliage plants. We do cacti and succulents, tender climbers. So anything that really isn't a hardy plant that lives in the garden all the time, we judge those as a panel. So we had about 17 that we went round. But then there will be a panel that are judging what they call the woody panel. So they're doing sort of trees and shrubs and clematis, any sort of hardy woody plants. There's a herbaceous committee. There's also the bulbs, so anything that's bulbous. So they're all broken around into various panels, and we all judge our speciality.
Excellent, good stuff. So just a reminder that at the end of the podcast, we'll have some listeners' questions. And if you've got a question for the team, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com. But before we listen to those celebrities at Chelsea and before we get to those listeners' questions, what should we be doing in the garden at the moment, Martin? I'm just looking out the window and it's absolutely pouring down here in Nottinghamshire.
But it's ridiculous, isn't it? Because 2 days ago it was really hot, sunny, dry, 20-odd degrees. So, yeah, it just changes.
I know it does, yeah. Very changeable at the moment. Everything is growing, isn't it? The lawns are growing like mad.
The weeds
and everything
are
in
growing.
the border, and the weeds are growing as well. So that would be one of the jobs. If you are, you've got the vegetable garden or the borders, keep on top of the weeds, because it's surprising how quickly they grow at this time of the year. They start to flower and then they produce their seeds, and the whole problem goes on. But I've put two in that have actually got a bit of a Chelsea theme, because traditionally there are a couple of jobs that we do at this time of the year, and one of them is known as the Chelsea chop. And the Chelsea chop, for those that don't know, is when we grow herbaceous perennials in the garden and they're now making strong growth. But if we cut them back by a third or a half, what it does, it slows down the flowering process, because they have to make side shoots and then regain that growth. So it prolongs the flowering but extends it later on into the season as well. And very often with tall perennials, it keeps them slightly shorter and stockier, and it means they don't need as much support, which if you're in a windy situation, they can often blow around. So the Chelsea chop is something that you normally do this sort of third week in May. So if you've got herbaceous perennials, things like asters, the Michaelmas daisies, that type of thing. Sedums work really well this way, veronicas and veronicastrums and phlox, all these lovely tall growing late summer flowering perennials. If you go around with your shears now or your secateurs and cut them down by, as I say, a third or a half, you're just going to get some flowering later.
So hang on then, a bit more detail. You're saying use your shears, but you don't want a flat top on the bunch,
you do.
you?
Well, yes, you can,
Okay.
because then what happens is the buds below where you've taken them off with the shears, there's dormant buds on the stem will grow and make new shoots that will...
But then aren't you left with a bit of a stalk sticking up above the leaf?
You
buds?
might get a tiny little bit. You could
Okay.
do it with secateurs.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to, if you've got various clumps of the same plant and you wanted to extend the flowering period, leave one as it is, cut one down by a third and another clump down by half, and then you'll get flowering at various points through summer, late summer and into autumn. So you can really extend the life of the flowering quality in your herbaceous borders.
Okay.
So that's one job I would definitely be doing now, and we'll be, when it does stop raining, we'll do it with secateurs if you don't want
Yeah.
those little dead
Okay.
bits. And the other one is, again, I always recommend to people, if they've got problems on their apple trees or plum trees where you get the little maggots in the fruits. On the apples, they're caused by the codling moth. On plums, it's the pink plum moth larvae that eat inside the fruits. A really good way to control them is to use a pheromone trap that you hang in the tree. It lures in the males, catches the males, and then the females can't lay fertile eggs. So if you put those in the tree now, they will start to work and they will do their job really, really well. So you can do that and protect your fruits from those lovely little grubs that eat into them.
Can I give you an update on my apple tree that I did a winter wash on? Because a few podcasts ago, I did the winter wash on my apple tree, and it's looking amazing. And it's got some it's had a wonderful blossom. It's not seeming to have any leaf curl that it's had the last 2 seasons. So I'm touching wood that there's going to be a decent crop of apples. But we've got the June.
Excellent.
There's a June drop yet to come, though, isn't there? A lot of those drop off.
There is the June drop, which is when your little apples get to a point where some of them decide they don't want to live on the tree anymore and they drop to the floor. And it's the tree essentially regulating its own growth. It doesn't want to support all the apples, so it loses some. So we wait for the June drop, and then maybe July time, if we still think there's too many, we can thin them a little bit more. But don't do anything at this point to take any off. Let nature do its own thing.
Get your pheromone trap though, Sean.
Yes.
You don't want any of those grubs inside.
You were
And
supposed to
I
be getting
noticed-
those out last week, as I recall. That was your job, wasn't it? I don't remember.
Oh, was it? Oh, right. Yes, exactly. Yes. But what we didn't do is we didn't do a winter wash, one of these organic winter washes. And on one of our apple trees, we have got all those twisted leaves with those thousands of little black aphids in there as well. So, if that is a problem and it's on the tip of some extension growth, the easiest way to deal with them is just to pinch them out, pinch the whole tip of the stem out, get rid of it, and it will just carry on growing.
Now, while Martin was at the show, he caught up with a few celebrities and asked about their highlights of Chelsea.
This is Alan Titchmarsh, having a great time at Chelsea Flower Show. Fabulous weather and some brilliant planting in the gardens. Hard landscaping takes slightly backseat. We've got these great lush borders of extravagant planting, which for me is the essence of Chelsea. Good plants, good plantsmanship, great nurserymen. It's a lovely outing altogether.
Thank you, Alan. You're a star.
My name is Sophie Rayworth and I am here at the Chelsea Flower Show. I present the BBC One coverage along with Joe Swift. And we're standing in the Great Pavilion at the moment, which is always spectacular, a treat, a visual feast for the eyes. Chelsea is wonderful this year. We've got the sun is out and amazing gardens. And some of my favourites, I have to say, are the National Garden Scheme, because that's Tom Stewart Smith, and my mum and dad opened their garden for more than 40 years. They've got a spectacular garden. It's the background to my childhood, and it was rather emotional going on to the NGS garden. And also Tom Massey's garden is absolutely fantastic. Great, huge, big steel structures. It looks amazing.
It does, doesn't it? Some amazing gardens, as you said. But we're here in the pavilion. Any favourites in here? Any plants that you think, I want to take that home and grow it in your own garden?
Every year I take home a rose, either David Austin or Peter Beale, one of them. And my garden is now, I've been doing Chelsea for 10 years now. It's my 10th anniversary this year. And I have 10 roses. Actually, I've got 11 roses in my garden from Chelsea, because I got one that was the Deborah James rose. Do you remember Bowel Babe? Mm-hmm. And I got a cutting from that 2 years ago. So I came back with 2 that year, and it's just bloomed for the first time.
Okay, that's great. Well, I hope you find a beautiful rose. And I see you've been looking at the clivias over there. Do you fancy growing a clivia?
I'm not sure I'd do it quite as well as this gentleman here, but I'm matching. My dress is bright orange,
exactly.
As are the clivias.
Yes, they are.
So
good. You
I look good next to them.
Yeah, you could be camouflaged against them.
Exactly.
Sophie, thank you very much.
Hello, my name is James Alexander Sinclair, and my highlight of the Chelsea Flower Show is a very difficult thing. There's a list that I've got. Highlight number 1 is obviously chatting to Martin Fish, because that's always a pleasure and a privilege to
James, you're so kind.
Highlight number 2 is doing what I do at sort of pretty much most of the flower shows, which is to judge gardens, which is always fun and interesting and exciting. And highlight number 3, which is like a secret pleasure because it isn't actually anything to do with what I'm supposed to do. Highlight number 3 is basically coming into this pavilion when nobody else is here. So it's one of the things that I can do, because I'm very sneaky and I hide in a shed until everybody else has gone home, and then come out here and just breathe in plants. Because it's those of us who are garden designers are sometimes thought to be not quite as planty as we should be. And actually we all love it in here more than we do out there doing gardens.
Really? Yeah. See, I always thought you didn't, but it's great that you've said that, because we've got some amazing specialist nurseries in here, and there's so much knowledge and different types of plants. I'm really pleased that you enjoy hiding in the bushes.
It needs to be applauded and lauded. The work that goes on in here, because it's very easy sometimes to walk down Main Avenue and say, oh yeah, what a fantastic garden, it's big and it's wonderful and it's beefy and it's showy offy. And you come in here and you find a little hosta, or you find a little alpine, or the succulents or something over there. There's just little tiny things that make much more difference.
And of course the show gardens are amazing out there. Some fantastic gardens, large and small. So they are great. But I'm going to let you go and hide and just tuck yourself into some of the shrubbery over there.
Yes, if you see the security going in my direction, could you distract them, please?
Oh, absolutely, yes, we'll do. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Martin.
So that was James Alexander Sinclair. And for those that don't know, James, as well as being a garden judge at the RHS shows, he's also a presenter and a very well-known garden designer in the UK. And it's always great to catch up with Mr. Titchmarsh. You know, he's a legend, isn't he? A TV legend, writer, author, you know, been around for a long time as Alan. And Sophie Rayworth, of course, you probably see her mainly reading the news on the BBC,
Correct,
but she does the Chelsea coverage.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, really nice to hear from them and catch up with them. Should we get into some listeners' questions? Jill, have you got one there?
I've got a couple, yes. One of them is from Andrea, who is a regular listener of both our videos and the podcast. So hi, Andrea. Thanks for getting in touch. She says, I've got a question for you. She should hope you enjoyed Chelsea, by the way. She's worried about her grass. It isn't great, mostly down to the dog weeing on it, I'm afraid. They've scarified it, as we've mentioned before, spiked it and top-dressed and seeded it with Johnson's tough grass, which is hard-wearing and ideal for play areas and dog patch resistant. Should or could we feed it? If so, what with? We're trying to be organic. Any tips?
Okay. Well, really, you don't need to feed it, Andrea, because the dog weeing on it is doing exactly that. And that's what causes the brown or the yellow patches when a dog wees on your lawn, because it's just a high concentration of nitrogen, the urea in it. So normally the best thing you can do where you've got your patches is to dilute it even more. And what some people do, and I know it's not easy to do, but if you're out with your dog in the garden and it has a wee, if you've got a watering can of water standing by, just pour that onto the area straight away. That will dilute the dog's urine and it will actually feed your lawn for you. I know that's not always possible, but where you've already got the patches, what I would do is just scratch the soil a little bit with a little garden fork, sprinkle your seed on, maybe put a little bit of fleece over it just to protect it and stop the birds taking it, and it will grow. You could, over the rest of the lawn, I suppose, use a fertiliser, and there are some organic fertilisers that would be ideal, just sprinkle it on. But the main thing in order to keep your lawn in good condition, apart from feeding it, is mow little, and often that helps to really thicken up the grass. Don't mow too close, and try and get your dog to wee somewhere else rather than on your lawn.
And aerate, that's really important.
Oh yes, aerate, Sean, yes, I forgot that one. Well done.
You know, I'm learning something from doing these podcasts finally. We've got another question. It's one that came up on YouTube on our most recent video, or the one before last video, if I get them in the right order, about zinnia and cucumber. And it's from Manuel Silva, who's in Atwater, California, which isn't a million miles away from where I went on holiday last year, near Yosemite National Park. So very different climate to what we have here. But the question is, used compost instead of seed starting mix. Now, they're saying they have Kellogg garden soil or horse manure. Which would you recommend it? They're in California, as they mentioned. Now, I think there might be a kind of terminology thing going on here, because what they in the States call garden soil or seed starting mix, I think might be similar to what we call compost that comes in bags. Would I be right? What do you think, Martin?
I think you're right there, Sean. And even in the UK, there's often a little bit of confusion. So in England, the UK, towards soil is what is naturally in the earth. So, if you take your spade out there and you dig the ground, that is the soil. And it can either be sandy soil or clay soil or a lovely loamy soil. And what we do to improve that is we add very often manure, horse manure, cow manure, whatever you can get, or garden compost. And garden compost is what we would make with all our grass cuttings and the fallen leaves and all the vegetable waste that we get out the garden when we're clearing it. We put that into a heap, let it heat up, and it rots down over a season, and we get this lovely organic, what we call garden compost, a great soil improver and helping to keep the soil in good condition. When we're growing plants in trays and pots, house plants, bedding plants, tomato plants, whatever they are, we use a growing compost, and we get a bit of confusion in England between people knowing which is which. But usually a growing compost, traditionally for many years in the UK, has been based on peat. So it's a peat-based compost with added nutrients that we would use for sowing seeds and planting and potting on. We're losing peat now and we're substituting it with bark and coir and other materials. So that is a growing compost that we would use in a container. So for your seed sowing, when the sort of compost I used when we were doing the zinnias and the cucumbers, which are growing very well, by the way, the cucumbers are actually now ready to plant into their final container. That is, I think, what you would call your Kellogg's garden soil, which has been prepared especially for use in containers for seed sowing and planting out. So I wouldn't use manure for sowing seeds. It's too strong, it's too rich, it would scorch them. Does that make sense? Because it's a bit confusing.
Yeah, and just as a side note, Kellogg's over here is much more familiar as being a breakfast cereal.
It is, yeah.
With a bit of milk.
Yeah, and it might be the same in the States. Yeah. I don't know. I've not seen that. But yeah, coloured garden soil, interesting. My initial thought was that I don't want that for my breakfast, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, we've got another question.
Okay, we have a question from Tina, who has been watching our Pots and Trowels videos for 3 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
That's great. Thank you, Tina, for your
Tina.
support.
Star
That's
viewer.
Brilliant. Anyway, she has just moved into a new house in Liverpool, and her partner ordered her some young dwarf patio saplings for her birthday. So happy birthday, Tina.
Birthday.
Sorry we missed it. Unfortunately, the parcel was lost at his parents' house and they only discovered it yesterday. Even after being in a box for 3 weeks, the saplings look alive, just a little sorry for themselves. We've got a photo of them. Thanks for that, Tina. That really helps. So there's an apple, a golden delicious apple, a conference pear and a Sylvia cherry. How lovely. But she's got some questions. So do you think they're going to be okay? And what's the best way to nurse them back into health? If they do survive, should they be planted in the ground or would they be better in pots? And then whether they are potted or put in the ground, where in the garden would be the best to plant each of them? They have a semi-detached house enveloped by the garden on 3 sides, facing east, south and west.
Okay, right, good question. Thank you for the photograph, Tina, because I can see these trees. You've obviously taken them out of the packaging and they're in smallish square pots. Looks like it's quite an open fibrous compost, but as you say, they are alive. Certainly the apple's got some leaves on there, the pear tree has, and it looks like was it a plum or cherry that has been cut down, but it looks like the buds are alive. So I think the first thing I would do is make sure that the compost is given a good soak, because it's probably dried out. And if you think it's really dry, what I do is get a bucket of water, submerge it in it and wait till the bubbles stop rising, and then it's got right down to the roots. And probably just leave them in those pots for a week or two, and that will hopefully just trigger a bit more growth. Remember to keep them watered in between, and I think you'll find that they will start to produce a bit more growth. And then you've got the choice of either, as you say, putting them in pots, or you can put them in the garden. Now, these are patio fruit trees. They will be on a dwarf rootstock, so they'll be fine in a pot if you want. So if you wanted to go into a pot, I would get a bag of potting compost from your garden centre, and I would go maybe in a pot with no more than initially about a 12-inch, a 30-centimetre diameter. What you don't want to do is to suddenly put them in a huge pot, so no more than about a foot in diameter. Pop them in there to the same level. Make sure you filter the compost around that. Take it out obviously out of the small pot to start with, and just stand them in good light. They don't need to be in bright sunshine all day long, but they don't want to be in the shade, so they need to be good light. Just keep the compost moist but not too wet, and that will then hopefully root out into that and you'll get more growth. Alternatively, you could put them in the garden if you wanted to, if you think that's where they're going to be better because of ease of, not having to water and that type of thing when they're established. So I would then, just improve the soil, mix in a little bit of compost in with the soil to improve it, dig out the hole, plant them again to the depth that they're being grown in those pots, firm them down. And again, it doesn't matter where they are in the garden, but they need to be where they've got good light. So again, not in a deep shade or anywhere like that. So a good position with light. You don't have to plant them that far apart because they're dwarfs. So long as they've got maybe a metre between them, they'll be absolutely fine. So I'm sure they will grow. They've had a bit of a setback, but I think all will turn out well for you in the end.
Good, fingers crossed. And then next year you could send us a picture of how they're doing.
Yeah,
yes. That'd be great.
Yeah, you might not get fruit next year, but I would expect you to get quite a bit of growth by the end of this summer.
Well, am I right in thinking you're not supposed to pick the fruit?
Ideally, on the first year, you're not supposed to. If it does develop, you would normally take it off because it's all about building up the strength of the roots so that then promotes a better tree in the future.
So you'd actually take any fruits off?
I don't think there's going to be any fruit on those this year.
No, but next year?
See how they do this year. We'll have this conversation next year.
Okay. Remind us, Tina, and we'll have a chat about it.
Keep us posted, absolutely. And if you've got a question for the team, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com. I think that's about all we've got time for. We've gone all over the place today.
I think it is. It's been exciting.
Yeah, busy old episodes. But we're back again next week as normal, so we'll see you then.
Bye.
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 Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.